10 shocking facts about World War II that almost no one knows. What if I told you that during World War II, the United States Army had an invisible ghost army that tricked the Nazis with inflatable tanks and fake radio signals? And what if I told you that for a couple of the world's major powers, the Second World War never technically ended? These aren't plots from some Hollywood blockbuster. They're the unbelievable, once classified and often ignored stories that were supposed to stay buried forever. The official history of World War II is one of big strategies, epic battles, and clear winners and losers. But just beneath the surface is a hidden history, a world of secret operations, bizarre weapons, and strange twists of fate that are more shocking than any fiction. The version we learned in school barely scratches the surface. From a weapon that could silently float across an entire ocean to the family drama that put Adolf Hitler's own nephew in an American uniform, the truth is often stranger than we can imagine. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain. We're counting down the 10 most shocking facts about World War II that almost no one knows. These are the stories of ghost soldiers, forgotten battles, and secret lists that reveal a side of the war you've never seen before. So get ready to question everything you thought you knew about the biggest conflict in human history. Section 1. The war technically never ended for some nations. Let's start with a fact that sounds completely impossible. We all know World War II ended in 1945. VE Day in May, Vichy Day in September. The surrender documents were signed, parades filled the streets, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. But what if I told you that for two of the major players, Japan and the Soviet Union, the war didn't officially end until 1956, and that even today, a formal peace treaty is still missing? This isn't just a historical fun fact. It's a weird technicality of international law with real-world consequences. When Japan surrendered in 1945, it surrendered to the Allied powers as a group. But the peace process that followed was broken by the new Cold War. The US and its Western allies signed the Treaty of San Francisco with Japan in 1951, officially ending their part in the war. But the Soviet Union, now a rival to the US, flat out refused to sign. This created a bizarre situation. Moscow and Tokyo weren't fighting anymore, but they were still technically at war. This stalemate dragged on for over a decade. It wasn't until October 19th, 1956, that the two nations signed the Soviet-Japanese Joint Declaration, which formally ended the state of war and restored diplomatic relations. But it wasn't a real peace treaty. Why? The answer lies in a tiny, remote chain of islands that Russia calls the Southern Kurils and Japan calls the Northern Territories. Soviet forces grabbed these 4 islands in the final days of the war, and the argument over who they belong to has prevented a formal peace treaty ever since. For more than a decade after the fighting stopped, a state of war quietly lingered, a reminder that the end of a war isn't always as simple as a signature on a piece of paper. Section 2. Japan's ghost weapons, the Fugo balloon bombs. Imagine a weapon so silent and so strange that it could travel over 6,000 miles across the world's biggest ocean, completely undetected, to strike a continent that thought it was safe. This wasn't science fiction, it was Operation Fugo, one of the most bizarre weapons systems of the entire war. Frustrated by their inability to hit the continental US, Japanese military scientists developed a ghost weapon, the balloon bomb. The idea was as clever as it was terrifying. Between November 1944 and April 1945, Japan launched over 9,000 hydrogen-filled paper balloons from its coast. These weren't simple party balloons. They were sophisticated, unmanned weapons. Each one was about 33 feet across, made from paper, and carried incendiary and anti-personnel bombs. Their genius was their navigation system. They were designed to ride the powerful winter jet stream, a high-altitude river of air flowing across the Pacific. A clever system of sandbags and altimeters would automatically keep the balloon at the right altitude, ensuring it would complete its 3-day journey to North America. The goal was to start huge forest fires across the Pacific Northwest, causing chaos and panic, and they did arrive. About 300 balloon bombs are known to have reached the United States, Canada, and Mexico, but the plan to start a continental inferno mostly failed because the balloons arrived during the damp, rainy season. The most incredible part of this story, though, was the US government's response. Fearing mass panic and not wanting Japan to know if its weird new weapon was working, the Office of Censorship imposed a total media blackout. The silence worked so well that Japan, thinking the campaign was a bust, gave up on it in April 1945. But the secret had a tragic cost. On May the 5th, 1945, near Bly, Oregon, a pregnant teacher named Elsie Mitchell and 5 children found the remains of a balloon during a picnic. As they gathered around, the bomb went off, killing all 6 of them instantly. They became the only enemy-caused civilian deaths on the US mainland during the entire war. Section 3. The Ghost Army. America's Phantom Menace. What if you could fight a war not with bullets, but with illusions? What if your army's best weapons were inflatable tanks, giant speakers, and actors pretending to be generals? This was the reality for the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. This top-secret unit of 100 artists, designers, and sound engineers was tasked with one of the strangest missions of the war: to trick the German army on a massive scale. Activated in January 1944, the Ghost Army was a traveling roadshow of deception. Their job was to impersonate other, much larger US Army units to fool the enemy about the size and location of American troops. They could mimic 2 full divisions, about 30,000 men, using a theatrical bag of tricks. For visual deception, they had hundreds of inflatable rubber tanks, cannons, and jeeps. From a distance, they looked just like the real thing. Sound was their next weapon. The sonic deception team used huge speakers to blast recordings of troop movements with sounds that could be heard up to 15 miles away. They had a whole library of sound effects, from armored divisions on the move to soldiers setting up camp. The final layer was fake radio traffic. Spoof radio operators would mimic the communication patterns of real units, creating a web of false information for German intelligence to intercept. Their missions were incredibly dangerous, often operating just miles from the front lines to make their phantom presence believable. Their impact was astounding. In one mission, they tricked the Germans into thinking an attack on the Rhine River would happen 10 miles south of the actual crossing point. The deception worked, drawing German divisions away and allowing the real troops to cross with few casualties. It's estimated the Ghost Army's illusions saved between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives. Their story was so secret, it was classified until 1996, a phantom unit whose battlefield was the enemy's imagination. Section 4. Churchill's Black Book of Enemies. Imagine this: the Nazis successfully launch Operation Sea Lion, their planned invasion of Britain. The swastika flies over Parliament. What happens next? For 2,120 people, the answer was already written down in a terrifying document known as the Sonderfahndungsliste GB, or the Special Search List Great Britain. After the war, it became known by a simpler, more sinister name, Hitler's Black Book. Compiled in 1940, the Black Book was a hit list of prominent British residents and European exiles to be immediately arrested after a successful invasion. These were people the Nazis considered enemies of the Reich, figures who would form the backbone of any resistance. Special SS death squads, the same kind that would later carry out massacres on the Eastern Front, were set to use the book to hunt down and neutralize Britain's leadership. The list itself is a terrifying look into the Nazi worldview. Of course, it included political targets like Winston Churchill and his cabinet, but it went much further, targeting writers and thinkers whose ideas the Nazis found dangerous, like H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, Aldous Huxley, and Virginia Woolf. It also listed public figures like the actor and playwright Noel Coward. Jewish individuals were specifically marked. The book even listed organizations to be shut down, from the Freemasons to, bizarrely, the Boy Scouts. When the book was discovered after the war, some of those named reacted with dark humor. Noel Coward reportedly got a telegram from fellow list member Rebecca West that read, "My dear, the people we should have been seen dead with." But the list was a detailed blueprint for the decapitation of a nation's leadership and free-thinking spirit, a chilling glimpse of what would have happened if the Battle of Britain had been lost. Section 5. The unlikeliest sailor. Hitler's nephew fought for the United States. Of all the strange stories to come out of World War II, few can top the irony of this one. Adolf Hitler's own nephew served in the United States Navy, fighting against the Axis and even earning a Purple Heart. This is the almost unbelievable story of William Patrick Hitler. Born in Liverpool, England in 1911, William was the son of Adolf Hitler's half-brother. As his uncle's power grew in Germany, William tried to cash in on his infamous family name, hoping for a high-ranking job. Adolf, who reportedly called William his loathsome nephew, was not impressed. Dissatisfied with the boring jobs he was given, William tried to blackmail his uncle, threatening to reveal embarrassing family secrets. The relationship soured completely, and fearing he was walking into a trap, William fled Germany. He and his mother eventually moved to the US in 1939, where William spoke out against his tyrannical uncle. When America entered the war, he wanted to fight. After being rejected by the military, William wrote a passionate letter directly to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Intrigued, FDR passed the request to the FBI for a background check. Finally, the US government gave the green light. On March 6, 1944, William Patrick Hitler was sworn into the US Navy. The recruiting officer reportedly quipped, "Glad to see you, Hitler. My name's Hess." William served as a pharmacist's mate in the Pacific and was wounded in action. After being honorably discharged in 1947, he sought the anonymity he could never have with his birth name. He changed his surname to Stuart Houston, married and settled into a quiet life on Long Island, running a blood analysis laboratory. It's a powerful story of one man's choice to fight against his own bloodline in the name of freedom. We're halfway through our list, and as you can see, the stories left in the footnotes of history are often the most fascinating. If you're enjoying this look into the hidden side of the war, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us keep digging up these incredible, little-known events. Now back to the countdown. Section 6. The Secret Army of Mines. A lost battalion of women code breakers at a quiet country estate known as Bletchley Park. One of the most important battles of the war was being fought. This was the nerve center of Britain's code-breaking efforts. We've all heard of Alan Turing, but the story often leaves out a critical detail. By 1945, nearly 10,000 people worked at Bletchley and its outstations, and a staggering 75% of them were women. They were a secret army of intellectual soldiers sworn to secrecy for decades. These weren't just secretaries. Women were at the very heart of the code-breaking process. Some were debutantes with German language skills, tipped off by well-connected family about a hush-hush mission. Others were recruited after acing a cryptic crossword challenge in the Daily Telegraph, a test designed to find quick, lateral thinkers. Their roles were vital. Many women operated the massive, noisy bomber machines in grueling 8-hour shifts, hunting for the daily Enigma settings. Joyce Aylard, an operator, recalled how the loud machines permanently damaged her hearing. Others, like Betty Webb, intercepted and indexed German messages, sometimes stumbling upon the horrific realities of the war, like the early stages of the Holocaust. At the time, they were often just processing total gibberish, unaware of the full, horrifying context. Despite their talent, they faced sexism. Codebreaker was officially a male-only job. This meant that even brilliant mathematicians like Joan Clark, a key figure in cracking naval Enigma ciphers, had to be officially classified and paid as a lower-grade linguist. When the war ended, the Official Secrets Act shrouded their work in silence. Many of their own families never knew what they really did until the 1970s. These women were the unsung heroes of the intelligence war, their stories buried for decades. Section 7, 76 Hours of Hell, the deadly battle that lasted only 3 days. In the history of World War II, battles are often measured in weeks or months. But on a tiny, 2-mile-long island of sand and coral named Bastogne, one of the most brutal battles of the war was fought and won in just 76 hours. The Battle of Tarawa, from November 20th to 23rd, 1943, was a short, savage explosion of violence that is often overshadowed by the larger campaigns that came later. Tarawa was the first American offensive into the critical Central Pacific. The U.S. Marines were told it would be easy. A naval officer even boasted the pre-invasion shelling would be so intense the Marines would walk ashore standing up. He was catastrophically wrong. The Japanese had turned the island into a fortress, with over 4,500 elite sailors and laborers dug into a network of bunkers, commanded by an admiral who claimed it would take 1,000,000 men 100 years to conquer Tarawa. The assault started with a disaster. Landing craft got stuck on a coral reef hundreds of yards from shore. As the Marines were forced to wade through chest-deep water, they were cut down by merciless machine gun and artillery fire. The water turned red with blood. Despite horrific losses, the Marines clawed their way ashore, fighting hand-to-hand for every inch of sand against an enemy sworn to fight to the death. By the time the island was secure, 76 hours later, the cost was staggering. The entire Japanese garrison of over 4,600 was annihilated, but the victory came at a terrible price. In just over 3 days, the Marines suffered over 3,000 casualties, with nearly 1,000 killed. The American public was shocked by the immense losses for such a tiny island. But the brutal lessons learned at Tarawa led to huge improvements in amphibious warfare, paving the way for later, more famous landings like D-Day and Iwo Jima. Section 8. The Batwing from Hell. The Nazis' stealth bomber, decades before the iconic B-2 Spirit stealth bomber became a symbol of American air power, Nazi Germany was close to perfecting a strikingly similar aircraft. It was a revolutionary machine, years ahead of its time. This was the Horten Ho 229, a jet-powered, flying-wing fighter bomber often called the world's first stealth aircraft. Developed by brothers Reimar and Walter Horten, the Ho 229 was a radical design. The brothers believed that by getting rid of the tail and fuselage, they could drastically reduce drag and create a much faster plane. Their ideas caught the eye of Luftwaffe chief Hermann Göring, who issued the 3x1000 requirement, a bomber that could carry 1,000 kilograms of bombs 1,000 kilometers at 1,000 kilometers per hour. The result was something that looked like it was from the future. It was a sleek, blended-wing aircraft, powered by 2 jet engines buried inside its wings. But its most futuristic quality was its unintentional stealth. The smooth, tailless shape inherently had a smaller radar cross-section. Reimar Horten also claimed he planned to use a special carbon-impregnated plywood that would absorb radar waves, making it even harder for British radar to detect. A 2008 test by Northrop Grumman confirmed its radar profile was significantly smaller than other fighters of the era. The jet-powered prototype took to the skies in late 1944, showing incredible performance. But on its third flight in February 1945, one of the engines flamed out and the plane crashed, killing the pilot. With the war ending, a production order was never completed. When American troops arrived at the factory, they found the nearly finished V-3 prototype and shipped it back to the US for study. It remains one of the most fascinating artifacts of the war, a direct ancestor of the stealth aircraft that dominate the skies today. Section 9. The Lost Fortune. Allied soldiers found a real treasure train. It sounds like a scene from an adventure movie. In the final days of the war, American soldiers stumble upon a train filled with treasure looted by the Nazis. But this is the true story of the Hungarian Gold Train, a real-life treasure train found by US troops in 1945. As the Red Army advanced in late 1944, Nazi officials in Hungary began plundering the country's Jewish population, who were being rounded up and sent to death camps. They confiscated gold, jewelry, diamonds, priceless paintings, and expensive rugs, anything of value. This immense hoard was loaded onto a 46-car freight train to move it to safety in Germany. The train never made it. In May 1945, after Germany had already surrendered, it was intercepted by US soldiers in Austria. The contents were estimated to be worth over $200 million at the time, billions in today's money. But what happened next is where the story gets controversial. The treasure was moved to an army collection point, but according to official reports, discipline broke down. High-ranking US officers requisitioned some of the finest items for themselves, furnishing their clubs and villas with stolen china and paintings. Other items simply vanished. The US originally planned to return the property to Hungary for restitution, but with Hungary falling under Soviet influence, that plan was scrapped. In 1948, much of the remaining treasure was auctioned off, with the proceeds going to a refugee organization. It wasn't until a 1999 Presidential Commission report that the full, complicated story of the train and the mishandling of its contents came to light. It's a troubling story of greed and the chaos of war, where the line between liberator and looter became disturbingly blurred. Section 10. The accidental shot that started it all. Every great conflict has a flashpoint. For World War II in Europe, that moment is Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939. But the very first casualty of that invasion, the first man to die in a war that would claim over 70 million lives, wasn't a Polish soldier. It was a German sympathizer, killed as part of a staged false flag operation. The story unfolds in the pre-dawn darkness of that fateful September morning. Nazi Germany needed a pretext to invade, so they launched Operation Himmler. As part of this, SS commandos dressed in Polish uniforms staged a fake attack on a German radio station in the border town of Gliwice. To make the attack look authentic, they brought a prisoner with them, Franciszek Honiok, a 43-year-old Polish-German farmer who had been arrested the day before. The SS commandos stormed the station, broadcast a short anti-German message in Polish, and then, to leave behind proof of the Polish attack, they shot and killed Honiok, leaving his body at the scene. He was referred to in German plans as canned goods, a pre-prepared body to be used as evidence. His death was used by Hitler in a speech that same day to justify the invasion of Poland. This small, cynical tragedy is a powerful symbol of the nature of war itself. The grand invasion was kicked off not by a heroic charge, but by a cold-blooded murder designed to sell a lie. This one death opened the floodgates to 6 years of unprecedented slaughter. It's a shocking reminder that the most destructive war in human history began with a moment of simple, fatal deception. Conclusion. From a war that never officially ended to one that began with a staged murder. From a ghost army of artists with inflatable tanks to ghost weapons floating silently across the Pacific. The story of World War II is so much grander, stranger, and more complicated than we're usually told. These facts aren't just trivia, they're windows into the hidden realities of the conflict, revealing incredible ingenuity, profound sacrifice, and the bizarre twists of fate that shaped our world. We've seen how Hitler's nephew fought for America, how a secret army of women helped crack the Enigma code, and how the Nazis had a detailed hit list for Britain. Each of these stories forces us to look at the war from a new angle and reminds us that history isn't a settled narrative. It's a vast story with countless chapters still waiting to be discovered. The more we dig, the more we find that the truth is often the most shocking story of all. What did you think was the most shocking fact on this list? Do you know another unbelievable woo-woo story that we missed? Let us know in the comments below. We love reading your insights, and if you want to keep diving into the most incredible and forgotten stories from the past, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Thanks for watching.